Hello everyone, just a reminder that the webinar is about to start in about 2 or 3 minutes from now. We'll just let everybody join and then we'll continue from there. Note that there is a live chat that is attached to this broadcast. Unfortunately, there is a delay, so I will only get to see or you will only get to hear me a little bit after I've talked. So if there is a bit of a delay just to get to your question, just be patient with that. And so we'll just handle that as per the chat box. If you've got any questions or queries as we are doing the webinar, then just let me know. So use the chat box and that would, or the live chat, and then I will see your questions coming through from there. We will start the webinar shortly in 2 minutes, and we'll just wait for guys to join us then. There's a minute to go. We'll start the webinar at 10 o'clock. Just waiting for people to join, and then we'll start the webinar at 10 o'clock. Just a reminder, there is a chat box. If you'd like to send through your queries or your questions or comments, please, you are welcome throughout the webinar to chat, post questions, and we will deal with them as they come up. There is a small delay between our broadcast and the video that will be streamed to you. So if there is a bit of a delay to answer your query, please excuse that small delay, and we'll get your query as soon as possible. All right, we've reached 10 o'clock. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the webinar Micrographics, the impact of the exchange information request on the choice of Autodesk software. Many of us have recently become involved in projects in South Africa that are not only South African but also global, or that are run in South Africa under a more global BIM environment, specifically the ISO 19650 standard, which is rolled out across the globe and which is very welcome from a standardization perspective. And today we'd like to discuss the exchange information request and the impact that that has on the supply chain. So to give you a bit of background on this, I was involved in a project which was worth over a billion rand, and quite a large project with many consultants working together. And initially the lead on the project was inundated with queries as to what software they should use and what can they get away with. So usually what you'll have in a project is, if you have a situation like that where you don't state exactly what software somebody else should use, there's a question, well, what can I get away with? Also, different consultants use different software, and BIM as such is touted as being a software agnostic process, which in the strictest sense is true, but there are advantages and disadvantages of this. And what this looks at is from the perspective of the owner or the operator, or what we refer to today as the appointing party. So that might be a government, it might be a corporate, it might be a property manager, it might be one of many entities, but essentially the person that forks out the money for the project. What power do they have within this environment and within the BIM protocols and within the ISO 19650 standard in the supply chain? So that's what we'll really want to have a look at. So on the agenda today is one, an owner-operator has enormous power because of the exchange information request. It is a document that states what they require, hence requirements or request, what they are requesting as information on the exchange. So the exchange in this case would refer to the common data environment, which in essence in the Autodesk world is the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So we are focusing on Autodesk software here, and so the common data environment is the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Just by the way, on FYI, the Autodesk Construction Cloud is built around Autodesk software, and it affords Autodesk software users a lot more capability and interoperability and collaboration opportunities on a project than a common data environment that would accept only static models. In other words, usually referred to as IFC. So that's a typical project in the past, or you could say in general, if BIM was purely agnostic as to the software, then we would say share a static model, and that's that. There's no interoperability or collaboration advantages to that platform with regards to Autodesk software. Okay. Then the supply chain, in other words, everybody that collaborates on that project, whoever is going to deliver the project to the owner operator, is going to be chosen or appointed based on the supply chain BEP to the EIR. And that is usually the lead. So if the lead, in the intro I mentioned this project where the project manager had to deal with so many queries because it wasn't stipulated exactly what software must be used on the project, an enormous amount of his time was wasted and energy was wasted trying to sort out everybody's queries. So what we'll say is, when the appointing party wants to appoint a supply chain to deliver their project, they will state, you guys will use this software, you guys will use this common data environment, this is the process that you will follow. And in essence, if you respond to that with a BEP, that would be in response to the tender request, then you might have 2 or 3 different supply chains saying, we want to build your skyscraper, or we want to build your highway, or we want to build your power reactor, whatever it is that you want to build. Here is our supply chain. We are 100% prepared to meet your requirements. We will use the software that you state. We will use the common data environment that you are saying, and it will be managed in that way because this is your requirement. Right? And very simply, if the supply chain is not prepared to meet those requirements, the owner or the appointing party does not have to accept their tender, and the project can go to somebody who is willing to operate according to the exchange information request by the client. Traditionally, and we've seen this multiple times, there are disputes over intellectual property. A company, regardless of their discipline, might invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions of rands in establishing their intellectual property with regards to the software that they use, the systems within that software, the families within the case of Revit, their assemblies and sub-assemblies, their ways of working within their files. So usually there's a resistance, and it's justified. You can't invest and stay competitive if somebody continuously steals your intellectual property. However, if you are the owner, you can say, I insist that you give me the original authored BIM file. In other words, I will not accept that you only give me an static file like an IFC file. You have to give me the originally authored file. How that file is shared is a question. So will you allow other companies to have access to the originally authored file? as a copy within a BIM Level 2 compliant environment like the Autodesk Construction Cloud. In other words, files are shared safely. In essence, a copy of a copy is shared to the receiving party, and the original copy is worked on in a work in progress environment, and the intermediate copy is the shared file, which is there as a record of truth. So that is the contention of the supply chain. How will that work? So as an owner, you will have to make accommodation for how people work together. So you might include clauses like you will share the original authored copy with the understanding that anybody within the supply chain who has access to that document will only use it for the purpose it is provided for. And in time, depending on who oversteps their boundaries, they might even be excluded from the next projects on the supply chains, because if you can't work together with your partners on a supply chain, what is the point of having you on that supply chain? So that would be a natural attrition or a natural selection of partners who work together successfully on a supply chain, although the damage might already be done. So you could include further clauses to state, if you do overstep the boundaries, you open yourself to litigation. So then you will be taken to court if you steal other people's intellectual property. Or you could try and protect the individuals on the, or the individual consultants on the project and state, we will accept that you share industry foundation class, IFC, or NWD files with the other consultants if you are concerned about that, because then the models that you share are static. However, the originally authored file will still be available to the owner or to the appointing party. Why would we want to do that? Well, it's our built asset. If we are the appointing party, it's our built asset. So we would like in the future to continue operating that asset. Maybe we want to knock something down and build something new, or do maintenance, or do modifications or additions, or replace outdated equipment. Whatever it is that we'd like to do to our built asset in the future, we need to build on an existing platform. And that would include then the original authored files, because somebody doesn't have to reverse engineer what is already there and has already been created. In addition to that, depending on what software is used, you might need those original authored files downstream, just in terms of the life cycle of the project. Usually we can get away with IFC, but there is the query. So there is also a responsibility on the part of the owner. If in the future a project is once again activated, one must ask, are we going to use the original consultant? So that's not guaranteed. Although we have their file, we have possession of the intellectual property, we might appoint somebody else to work on that project. And again, in that case, that's where the lawyers would have to become involved, and some ground rules will have to be structured to say these files are provided with the understanding that in the future the project might be worked on. We might not be the party that works on that file, and we give permission to whoever is going to carry on with that project at that time to use the original authored file. If that's not acceptable, then, well, again, we've got the supply chain, and we can say, do we have a separate supply chain that we can contract that is prepared to give us what we need for the future? That, in essence, is the client get what the client pays for, but you state it up front. You state up front that you want the original authored models, and you can carry on with that. All right. So there is also an information cycle throughout the project, and you don't want information to get lost, because that wastes money. And you have a responsibility as an owner, as well as a supply chain at specific points, to maximize your return on investment on that built asset. And although you might perceive some of your requirements to be proof that the supply chain is worthy of your contract, it might act against your best interest. So the responsibility to make the maximum amount of profit out of that built asset is a bidirectional flow of responsibility. Both parties, the supply chain and the appointing party, has responsibilities. We'll discuss that a little bit more in detail, but then Revit cloud files are the most easily upgradable files. So when you adopt something like Revit and the Autodesk Construction Cloud, you as an owner can actually just press a button, and that button will upgrade your projects in a new year. In other words, a lot of times these projects lay dormant until something happens. And then you find 10 years have gone by, 15 years have gone by, 20 years have gone by. Are those files still relevant? Nobody knows if Revit is going to be around in 20 years from now. Probably will be, we don't know. But for as long as Revit is operating in the way that it operates now, we can upgrade Revit from year to year as it evolves without having a Revit license, just by virtue of having access to the information model. So it's an intelligent choice from an appointing party perspective to stipulate Revit cloud files and the AEC Construction Cloud. And then complex projects can be tackled using a range of products in AEC Collection. As you'll see, the AEC Collection, again, it's Autodesk software, and the entire conversation is about why should you as an owner operator, as a corporate, as a government, why should you take a hand and perhaps on a project stipulate the specific software that should be used, and why should it be Autodesk software? Right, so coming back to step number one, an appointing party has enormous power because of the exchange information request. 1. The modern ISO 19650 exchange information request helps to bind the supply chain to the contractual obligations and to provide information models. BIM models, or building information models, those are the models that we model in Revit. The project information model, which is all the communication that is recorded and the actions and the events that are recorded during the project's construction, will then reside on the cloud in that information model, and that is known as the project information model. And then the asset information model, which is the final digital twin, you could say, with which the project will be managed. So there's a interaction between reality and virtual digital twin that will help you to manage that facility, be that from a maintenance perspective or from a future development perspective, whatever it is. And in the format that the owner and the operator has specified. This means the owner is allowed to state the built assets must be modeled in specific software and hosted on a specific common data environment. We've just discussed that. In general, for buildings, the owner may specify Revit cloud models hosted on the Autodesk Construction Cloud, stated in as many words. There it is. In case of models that cannot be represented, other software in the Autodesk AEC Collection might be or may be specified. That again is within your prerogative to state. So the interoperability between one vendor's software is usually better than between vendors. The translation of one file format to another file format is generally more likely to succeed than if you had to go from a different vendor to your software, or vice versa. Right? So again, you want to save yourself money, trouble. You don't want problems on your project, so try and minimize your risk in that sense. In other cases, this may be impossible, and other means of producing the models have to be accommodated. So that is quite often the case on large industrial projects where there is manufacturing or processing that's occurring. And we've had an example of a wine farm, which isn't such a large project, but still the software that's used on there is wide-ranging and isn't software that Autodesk stipulates. Also, it might be advanced engineering software, which you wouldn't have within the Autodesk stable, and then you have to find ways to work with that. I see I've created a spelling mistake there. And there is a the whole decision trees, just to give you a bit of background on that. There are decision trees even that you could consider. Just want to open this quickly. Right, so for instance, when you look at something like clash detection, just to demonstrate for you, you as a client, you might not perfectly understand what is necessary from a clash detection perspective. So you can consider this, for instance, this might be one of the considerations that your BIM representative might specify, right? So your BIM representative is supposed to make sure that the clash detection on a project happens well, easily. And now you've got different file formats that come into place. So you've got, over here, you've got Industry Foundation, but on the cloud platform, Industry Foundation can be tracked, or it can be other, and so forth. And depending on what software, you can see there's Siemens, Magicad, there's Tekla, there's Vectorworks, there's ArchiCAD, there's all sorts of software in here that could be used on a supply chain. But if you don't state which software will be used, you stand a chance that some of this other software impacting the project just in a way of how do we clash detect. So the BIM manager will have to go and evaluate that and say, let's go through the decision tree right at the beginning of the project and see what software is required by the supply chain. Can we make the downstream processes easier or automated? First prize in this case would be, can we just clash detect on the cloud as people share their models? Is there an intermediate step that we have to go through? And if we can get away with a simpler or a more aligned, Autodesk aligned software environment, we stand a chance that we can use AEC Coordinate, which is the clash detection module of the cloud, to automatically clash detect models. If the project does not lend itself to this, we might have to end up with using Navisworks as clash detection, as in days of old. And then we can still try and host the files that are exported onto the Autodesk Construction Cloud. If you look at something like Bentley files, Bentley is not accommodated on the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So there we would have to accept something like an IFC file or an NWD file, which is saved to the cloud instead. So from an information management perspective, there are various considerations that enter the BIM consultants' recommendations to the client as to how the EIR should be structured. Then the supply chain is hosted by virtue of the supply chain BEP response to the EIR. Right? So when the project is put out to tender, the supply chains may respond to the request, and if they are not prepared to meet their obligations under the EIR, then they will or might not be considered for appointment. Specifying the specific Autodesk solutions may seem overly constraining, and for some consultants they are, but when one considers the advantages that accrue to the owner, it can be justified. All right? That's obviously subjective, but it is something that could be discussed during the tender process. In the case that the optimal preferred solution is not possible, usually because of the nature of the project, then the familiar Autodesk solutions may be leveraged to host disparate file formats. However, not everything is possible. We've just demonstrated that with the clash detection considerations. And because Autodesk is a global player with the most presence, it makes sense to adopt their solution to maintain global relevance. So you'll find that a lot of software is region specific, but with Autodesk it is global. So you stand a good chance of getting support and of having everything available to you wherever you are on the planet. Okay. Then traditionally contentious disputes over intellectual property can be eliminated. Just like with the choice of software, it is also the prerogative of the owner to state that they will take possession of the original models for these specific purposes. It is important to maintain professional respect amongst participants in the supply chain, so clauses must be built into contracts to allow for intellectual property to be respected. In the case of IP boundaries being overstepped, the relevant parties should be free to pursue legal recourse. Ultimately, it's to everybody's advantage to collaborate respectfully, and in the extreme, the owner must take responsibility of the originally authored models, and the collaboration must proceed using the industry foundation class instead. Right? And we've discussed that already to say that the owner should look after their own interests first, and that is at least they should have the originally authored models. They've paid for the models. Why shouldn't they get the models? If it isn't stipulated, you stand a chance that whoever the person is that is not prepared to share their file is not going to share their file. And then you are stuck in a situation where you are basically held to ransom to say, if you do any future work on your asset, you will have to contract us because we own the live file. You have an alternative in that case. You can go and reverse engineer whatever we've modeled, and then you can go and have that as an asset instead. You don't want to be in a situation like that. You want to state as the owner, I'm paying for this asset, so I will take ownership of that original model, and I will do with that model as I see fit in the future. And if that means that at that stage you are either not around as a consultant, maybe you've closed your doors, or you've changed hands, or you're now in different ownership, or you've been amalgamated into a bigger or smaller entity, or whatever has happened to your business in the future, we don't know. And so we want at least the original model. That's part of the price that we pay, and that the other people pay. So this diagram is a very familiar diagram. It's from the old PASTA 192 documentation. And this shows you the information delivery on a typical project where the process starts with the employer's information request, or as it was known then, now it's the exchange information request. Then there's the BIM execution plan, which we've just shortly discussed. And basically, once the information request goes out, you might end up with a document like this, which states these are the software that will be used. That's the version and the update that we are going to accept on this, right? And then we could say, all right, with regards to hardware, because again, not only the software also works with hardware. So we might state, look, based on the hardware requirements, you will do the following. So I don't know, very few people seem to realize this, but Revit files are compressed files. And when you load them into your computer's memory, they blow up by 20 times. So if you've got a 1 gig Revit model, you're going to need 20 gigs open RAM memory just to manage that within your computer. Otherwise, it's going to use virtual RAM and use your hard drive instead. So people that are knowledgeable with this process, you might even say, look, I need efficiency on this project. What that means is that when you guys are working with the files that you're supposed to be working with, you will have the correct hardware, or otherwise you're wasting my time and my money, putting the project at risk because the project is going to be late because your computers are not up to standard. Specifying that in the exchange information request, responding to that with a BEP will then ensure that contractually, once you sign the contracts, that whoever is on the project will have the correct hardware to do that. Some companies are notorious for not wanting to spend on hardware, but the software and the hardware go together, and it's your project, and you are perfectly allowed to state that you want that efficiency on a project. And if your BIM consultant knows what is required from a hardware perspective, you can always ask them. All right. And basically what you see over here is that there are decision points within a project, and at specific points there are, or at specific stages in the information cycle, there are decision points. You can see after brief, concept and definition. This is where the appointing party is supposed to have their input. And then we get to something that is contentious in South Africa, and that is after you get through the definition phase. Now you get into the design and the build and commission and the close and hand out. the handover and closeout, you find many owner-operators and appointing parties want to become involved further during this design process. But note how the international best practice is to say, by the stage of the final definition, so that might be something like, for instance, the council has signed off on a building, all right? But now you want your guys to rework the building to see if you can get away with more. Best practice states then that you should actually restart with another employer's information request or exchange information request, because you're in essence overstepping your boundaries and asking the supply chain to do more work than what was agreed to benefit yourself, right? So we should also recognize that we as owners, I'm living myself into your role, we should also have a responsibility to make sure that we give maximum input by the definition stage. So we must push during the brief and the concept and the definition to tell the design people exactly what we want. We must be finicky about it and tell them everything that we want by the stage, all the materials, all the different types of components, whatever it is that we require on that project by that stage, it should be done. And then we should console ourselves. We might have some information later, but we're not going to get involved. So where could one use a good analogy? Boeing, right? They build aircraft, and they've got great engineers. And what do? They have a brief from somebody, build a large aircraft. Then they go into the concept. How do we build? What should it look like? And so forth. And then they go into the definition. And then at some other stage, they actually say, right guys, boom, freeze it. You say that you can get us another 10% with a bit of further design. I don't care. At this stage, it's done. It's locked. We're going ahead because we need the income from this project. We need that airplane to sell, right? And your engineers and your designers and whoever it is, at some stage, the owner must pull the trigger and say, until here, and now we go. But that is your call. And at the same time, you should then recognize that you've called it. And you should let the guys get on with it. So if you then go through the design process at number 4, and you come and interject here with some more conceptual or definition ideas, you're going back on your word here. You're saying, no, I've got some more things that I want now. Okay, but why didn't you say so originally? All right, so with regulation, municipal regulations, fines that could possibly be paid, chances that might be taken, there's so many different opportunities within this process where, you know, if you formalize it and if you think about the money that you make on an asset and you follow this process, globally acceptable and best practice, this is how you make money, by saying what you want, getting out of the way. And also with artificial intelligence now, being able to get to that optimal solution at the beginning of a process is easier. It's faster. And also the fact that you have to drop an enormous amount of money at the beginning to get this process rolling, that's also true. And if you follow that process, you stand a good chance of maximizing the return on your investment on your built asset. So we've all got responsibilities. All right, then Revit Cloud files are the most easily upgradable files. They're special. They can be upgraded from year to year on the cloud platform itself without having access to Revit. It means that the appointing party can keep the digital current in preparation for future developments. Having access to the originally authored Revit files and having them as cloud models, two things, therefore makes perfect sense from the appointing party perspective. What does it mean? If you use standalone Revit files, you can get away with something like a Revit LT and a docs license. That will allow you to create a cloud file. You will have to have at least the full Revit so that you can use cloud work sharing, and you will use Collaborate Pro. If you just upload a Revit file, then that doesn't count as a cloud file. Just uploading it onto the cloud doesn't mean it's a cloud file. They're special. Okay, Revit cloud files can be done on Worksheet. Like we mentioned, it could just be a Revit LT file saved using docs. And Revit cloud files can also be one of the cloud worksheet type, which means that collaborators can work in the same model at the same time, regardless of your geographical locations. You could be in Australia, we could be in South Africa and work together, or in the UK, or wherever on the planet that you are. And if you have internet access, you can be with us in the project at the same time. Of course, having worked on some Australian projects, it does play some havoc with one's sleep patterns. Having design meetings at 2 o'clock in the morning isn't fun for everybody, but it's a job, and just doing night shift, it's not such a biggie. Okay, and complex projects can be tackled using a range of products in the AEC collection. Okay, so it is a commonly held belief that BIM should be software agnostic in practice, and that one should accommodate software from any vendor. And the software interaction between the single vendor software will be superior due to the interaction superior to the interaction between multiple vendors. We've discussed that. And the AEC collection provides a spectrum of software, some exclusive to the AEC collection, something like vehicle tracking, something like a robot structural analysis, or a bridge design that is used in workflows that include more than one piece of software. All right. So the AEC collection, if you are not familiar with it, it does hold a whole bunch of software. The Autodesk AEC collection, it's meant as an overarching license for somebody that is within the built environment. And there you can see the products are based on your discipline: architects, structural engineers, MEP engineers, civil engineers, and construction professionals. So there's something for everybody. Typically, most disciplines would be able to be fully catered for within that software. And if you purchase, say, AutoCAD and Revit separate, it would be more than just one of these licenses, but it can only be used by one person at a time. And it comes with a docs license, which means that you can have access to unlimited storage on the internet for your design files. And that is the AEC collection. Autodesk University, great resource, and over here you can go and have a look at what is best practice globally using the AEC collection. So if you were interested, say, for argument's sake, in bridge design, then you will go and search for bridge design and find if there are any of the latest presentations that deal with bridge design. So where more than one piece of software is used together. For instance, here we can see from 2018, bridge design with InfraWorks. That's an AEC collection. Inventor, that's not in the AEC collection. Civil 3D and Revit. Right. So depending on your discipline, you would have most of the software available to you within the AEC collection. So, in conclusion, the exchange information request is to enforce the software accommodate environment may be used on project and holds benefits for the appointing party. That's really what we're interested in. How can we maximize the gain that we get out of the project versus the gain that the supply chain might get by not adopting the software, not adopting the Autodesk Construction Cloud, not following our exchange information requirements. And if we stipulate what we need with the help of our BIM consultant, then we can ensure that we get what we ask for. Okay? And then choosing the Autodesk AEC collection and the Autodesk Construction Cloud is a prudent course of action. It doesn't say it's the only course of action, it's a prudent course of action because Autodesk globally offers a proven and premium solution across the industry and the project lifecycle, and it is easily accessible and scalable. So you might get some arguments pro and for and against, right? But it is ultimately your choice as the owner which software solutions you are going to mandate, if you are going to mandate them. Make sure that you get the maximum value from your built asset through mandating Autodesk solutions, right? That is my contention. And you might think, sure, but these licenses are very expensive, and that's true. You know, purchasing something like the Autodesk Construction Cloud is an expensive discipline. And so how do we actually manage that process? And we would say, well, you can have multiple solutions. This is just the docs and the AEC collection that is shown over here. And if we, sorry, let me just duplicate this quickly. If we go onto a typical project, we'll see that we've got multiple licenses that we could buy into. Right? And again, how would you as the owner know this stuff? It's not your core business probably, so how are you supposed to know what to do? And that's where you get your BIM consultant. So here we can see the types of projects that we've brought onto our test project over here. It's docs. That's the only license that you get with your AEC collection, and also design, collaboration, and model coordination. And what implications does that have for us? Again, as an owner, we might not care. We might be a bank. We might be a petrochemical house. We might be a government. We might be anything, right? But it's not our core business. So we get a consultant that we trust to say, you run this project for me, you advise me, and you choose the correct software. And that is also dependent on the file types that you then upload onto the cloud. And so over here, for instance, we can see, all right, you purchase those licenses. There are pros and cons to these licenses in comparison to other vendors' offerings. Let's see if we can maximize our investment, right? And think about clash detection. Clash detection, traditionally, if you go back to the 1970s, we didn't have three-dimensional model clash detection. Today, we can eliminate 1/5 of the construction costs based on clashes than before. So let's suppose, for argument's sake, just for argument's sake, we get involved in building a $1 billion skyscraper, 20 billion rand housing complex, or whatever, a big corporate headquarters, or whatever it is that we are building. And then we say, all right, now how much can I save? And the answer is, on $1 billion skyscraper, you could save $200 million. That's already going to pay for the software. So it's a no-brainer just from a clash detection perspective to get that going. Then you have to ask yourself, all right, so when we get to the clash detection, just to take that decision matrix again, or that flow tree, do we want to spend time waiting for the clash detection? Or is there a way that we can put the files together so that it's automatically clash detected? And the cloud allows for that, but the cloud only allows for that under certain circumstances. If you use specific software. Autodesk software on an Autodesk cloud platform does that for you. It's quick. There are alternatives. Are they globally relevant? Probably not. Do you want to prepare your supply chains for global relevance? Probably. So, then go with the Autodesk solution. But, of course, the decisions around that might be a lot more complex than the simple solution that I've just outlined. Whatever it is that you require, do feel free to contact us at Micrographics. We have some experience on real-world projects and scenarios, advising both owner-operators, leads, be they project managers or principal agents. We know the Autodesk solution very well, and what we don't know, it's a very large topic. We can get Autodesk involved directly, if necessary. And before you start a project, that way we can help you to maximize your investment. It's easy to contact us, www.mgfx.co.za or info@mgfx.co.za. Set up a meeting with us, and let's help you get in touch with the right people and with the right solutions so that you can maximize your investments. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for attending. Looking forward to hearing from you.